Have you ever saw a show like Emily in Paris and thought to yourself, how true is that to the expat experience? Is that how it really is to be an American in another country? Well, I'm an expat in a foreign country, and I'm here to tell you what it is that I think about Emily in Paris. Stay tuned. Hi there and welcome back. If you're new to my channel, my name is Kelly and I'm an American who lives in Denmark. No, I don't live in Paris, and I actually don't live in a big city. So when I look at maybe the similarities and differences between my expat experience and Emily's expat experience, there's a lot of things to take into consideration when making that comparison. For starters, Emily actually comes from Chicago. I'm from a town outside of Chicago. So we come from the same area, which oftentimes means you have the same type of customs, right? Traditions. Not always, because a lot of that has to do with your heritage, where your family was from and those traditions that have been passed down and passed down. But it's really interesting that she's from Chicago and I'm from outside of it. So a lot of the things that I saw in the very first episode really reminded me of what I miss about Chicago. She's also in marketing, and I am about to finish my marketing program here in Denmark. So we have another similarity, which is quite interesting. But for the most part, we're actually much more different than we are similar. Before we get into that and I tell you my take on this Netflix show, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please consider doing that. I would love to have you along as a subscriber. If you are interested in the expat experience, or if you're interested in Denmark, you can get a lot of information here on my channel. So please consider clicking that red button. Now let's talk about the show. For starters, Emily is moved to Paris to work for a year. I moved to rural, small town Denmark for forever, pretty much. There's not a definite time on when I'm going to be leaving Denmark. I could leave Denmark next year. I could be here for the rest of my life. It's not something that we have set out. So I don't exactly know how long it's going to be for me. Another thing about Emily is that she moved to Paris alone. I can't imagine that. I mean, when I was younger, I really would have loved to have the experience of living somewhere else. But she left behind a boyfriend, and that just seems very independent and strong. I don't know if I could be able to do something like that, especially if she felt really serious about the guy. For me, I moved here because of my husband's job. I was married, I have 2 kids, so my family situation is much different than hers. Also, we don't know anything about her parents or siblings. I've only watched the first 4 episodes of the show, so I don't really see any strong family connection kind of pulling her back to Chicago. For me, there was a lot of tears when we moved to Denmark. And again, if we were only leaving for a year, maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. Years kind of go by quickly. But for me, knowing that we packed up an entire lifetime and a home and sold off so many things to move here, it felt very definite. And I think my family felt that they were never going to see me again. And we were very, very close and still are. So it's very difficult, even now, almost 5 years later, for me to live away from them because of that close bond that we have. So there are some differences right off the bat. She also moved to one of the largest cities in Europe. I live in a town of 8,000 people, so there's some differences there. When you are going out to explore the town, I did that. She goes out to explore, a bakery, and she's going for runs. I did that too. I was a very, very avid runner. And I would go running all the time. And that's how I really got to know my new town, is because I ran up and down almost every street in this town. So I know where everything is. And I've had very similar experiences to her. So for me, I hear a lot of things about this show. Oh, that's not how expat life is like. Well, of course not. You know, you're not going to have your downstairs neighbor be this fantastic, beautiful person that there may be some sort of love interest with at some point in time. For me, I'm married, so that's not going to happen anyways. But it's a TV show. So you kind of have to take the things as they come and say to yourself, you know, it's a TV show. It's not going to be perfect like that. But I felt a lot of connections with her because of the same expat experience. She also was going into the park to have her lunch, you know, eating by herself. And I did a lot of things alone, especially when we first moved here and my children went to daycare, because in Denmark it's very common to go to daycare and it's very common to have parents who work. Well, I started language school just like how Emily does. And she's very positive about everything. I was feeling so kind of negative about a lot of things, and I was really sad when we moved here. I think that really makes a difference. When you have that family connection kind of pulling you back to your home country, and you feel so much of what it is that you've lost, it makes it so hard for you to move forward. And I feel that my experience would have been a lot better had I not felt so sad in the beginning. For her, she, you know, had a lot of kind of things happen to her which were not pleasant, but she just kind of let it roll off her back, and it didn't affect her so much in making all these wonderful things happen for herself. So that's really inspiring, I think. I think it's a really good show to watch if you're an expat and you're having a lot of hard times. She doesn't have any friends when she moves to Paris. She doesn't know anybody. She lives alone. And who is it that she meets? Another expat. And it's so interesting. I love the character of Mindy, the girl from China that she meets who is an au pair. It's so important and it's so realistic, because really when you're an expat, a lot of the people that you meet and become friends with are other expats. You may have this grandiose idea of, oh, I'm going to just slide right into this new country and I'm going to adapt to all of the cultures. I'm going to learn the language. I am going to be, you know, a new version of whatever that country is, a new Dane for me. I had these high expectations, and unfortunately, yeah, I was disappointed, because just like with Emily, she felt it was impossible to ever learn the language. She would say the words over and over again. People would correct her all the time, and they would get all like annoyed in their faces and everything. And I remember that so much. The pain face is what I call it. Whenever you talk to a native and you're trying your best to sound out these words, but for whatever reason, your mouth and your ear, there's like something missing along the way. And I really feel for her. I went to language school. I went as far through as I could go. I got my certificate, and I still really don't understand what people are saying almost 5 years later. And I still have a really hard time speaking. Yes, it's probably because I'm surrounded by English. I worked in an English-speaking environment. I went to an English-speaking university. I speak English with my kids at home. They watch English TV. I think if I were to have more Danish friends, it would be better, because I would be able to speak more of the language. If I worked more around other Danes speaking Danish, then I would be forced to speak it more often. I know with Corona, being in lockdown, being self-quarantining and, social distancing and all that, I haven't really, it's been like a year of not really talking to a lot of people. And it's really made a lot of difference with my Danish, and it's just gone down. So I really understand how she feels with this struggle of, you're never going to learn the language, because even when you think you know it and you go to say something, so many times she says something very inappropriate because she thinks she's trying to say something the right way and it comes out all wrong. I totally feel you on that one, Emily. And I think a lot of expats do as well. It's so funny to see her go through culture shock, because she's so positive in the show, and it doesn't matter how positive you are, people will go through culture shock. And I could really relate to that. You know, when she is going up the flights of stairs and she goes to the wrong apartment because to her, she's on the 5th floor, but to really everyone else in Europe, she's on the 4th floor. I completely get that, you know, and it was a little confusing for me as well. Or she goes into a restaurant to make a reservation and she gets the dates mixed up because we do month and then day and then year. And then over here, they do it the other way. They do day, month, and year. And it's confusing if you don't know these things, you know? And she learns the hard way every single time. So you get to kind of experience with her. But, you know, there are some things that just seem so far-fetched. It's like, okay, well, she's gone to the wrong apartment door like 5 times. I mean, you think she'd catch on by now. Obviously, it's done for like dramatic effect and everything because it's a TV show. But, you know, just like little things like that. But it's so interesting to see that the experience that expats have, like for her in a big city like Paris, is very similar to what I experienced in a small town in Denmark. You know, she's surrounded by a lot of French people who are kind of mean to her, you know, and it's because they see her as being, what's the right word? They see her as being like an inconvenience, right? You know, she doesn't speak the language, you know, and I mean, she had no intention of going to that country, so she didn't prep for it. I tried to learn Danish before I came to Denmark, but I still could not understand what anybody was saying because I think the area of Denmark where I live in the middle of the peninsula, it's such a harsh dialect that it's like, I have no idea what people are saying half the time. You know, maybe if I go to other areas of Denmark, I might understand them better, right? I don't know. But there's still so many words I don't know. I mean, that's how it is. You know, you can't just expect yourself to be fluent right as you step on the ground of the new country, right? I don't know. But the people are very direct, and I'd say that that's very much what I've experienced here in Denmark. You know, I could be gardening in my front yard and then the neighbor will drive by, roll down her window and tell me what I'm doing wrong. And I'm just like, hi, you know, how you doing too? It's like, come on now. I don't know. It's maybe it's their way of feeling that they're being helpful, but it's just so, I don't know, when you're here, like, alone. And in a way, I feel alone. Even though I have my husband and my children, I'm very fortunate, the fact that I do have them. You know, some people are here completely alone. But, you know, they all speak Danish fluently. And they are all Danish. They have Danish passports. They are considered a part of the, you know, community. And I will always be seen as a foreigner and always be seen as someone who doesn't fit in. And when Emily's coworkers go to lunch and they don't invite her and they don't include her, even though she says, hey, you want to go to lunch? Want to get something to eat? And they say, oh no, I have plans. And they all go out to eat without her. And it's like right across the courtyard from where their office is. And so she can easily see them. And they do it every single day and they never invite her. And I remember when I first got my job here in Denmark, I worked in a department that was international, but it was for a Danish, school. And I can't tell you how true that is. I mean, I would like to say that it's just the French and just that TV show, but it's actually very true. I worked at that job for years, and there were tables that were pretty much ones where all the Danish teachers sat at, and then there was one table that was almost indirectly designated as the international teachers table, you know, and there was all these attempts to kind of blend us together, and I can't tell you, I mean, there was one incident where I was sitting at an empty table because all the other tables were full. And I thought, well, I'll sit here, you know, and see who joins with me and meet somebody new and have a new conversation and be excited about it. But people would come to my table to take the chairs away to add to tables that were already so overflowing, right? That there were no space for chairs. So the people would actually be sitting behind somebody else. And I'm thinking, okay. I mean, other people came to sit with me. It was like the janitors of the school. And I was just like so thankful for them. You know, I'm like, wow, two really nice people. You know, it's a lunch break. You know, it's like 35 minutes or something. Maybe not even. It's like a half an hour. You can't sit with a foreigner for a half an hour. It was just, I don't know. It really, and I was at that school for a couple of years. So I had spoken with most of those people and I actually knew who most of them were. It was just really disappointing. You know, it was just really disappointing. I know that some people will say, oh, well, I've never experienced anything like that. Well, if you're a Dane in Denmark, yeah, well, maybe you haven't experienced anything like that. But if you're a Dane who, I don't know, who has maybe not sat with a foreigner, I don't know. Have you ever tried to reach out and say, hey, you know, I don't know you. I'm going to try and meet somebody new. I feel like that's just crazy talk for people, you know. I would hate to think that that's how all the countries are in Europe. I have no experience. I only have experience in Denmark. But seeing that with Emily in Paris, it's just really kind of disappointing, you know, of the things that they point out. I mean, yes, it's funny that she does things wrong because she doesn't understand the difference in the culture and she's learning, right? But it's just, I don't know. To me, it hits really close to home when you have something like that where you're like, man, I really hope that was just, maybe it's just me. Maybe people just don't like me for whatever reason. You know, I was one of the only international teachers who actually spoke Danish, or at least tried to speak Danish. So I was at least making an attempt. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe it was just me. Let's just hope that. But when you're looking at a lot of the different characters, you know, she has to make a lot of adjustments. You know, with Emily, she goes into a restaurant and her food is not cooked the way she wants. And she says, oh, well, I'll send it back. The customer's always right. You know, with like these ideas like that we have in the USA. In the USA, the customer is always right. Customer service is very important. Companies want to make sure that the customers have a good experience, right? That is not the same in Europe. And I mean, from watching the show, if that's true, France, she tries to send her steak back because it isn't cooked the way that she had asked for it to be cooked. And then when the chef comes out and he says, why don't you just try it? And she tries it and she likes it. To me, that's like a miracle, you know? I'd be like, okay, I've tried it. I still don't like it. Why can't you just make it the way I asked you to? You know, and for us, it's just kind of like, oh, well, Americans are too picky. Why is it too picky to expect to get something that you asked for? I mean, if a Dane goes anywhere and asks for something, wouldn't they expect to get what they asked for? I don't know how that's kind of like Americans being snobby or something. It doesn't make sense. And usually for us, you know, yeah, the customer's always right. But in Denmark, I can't tell you how bad the customer service is. It's unbelievable. I don't know if that's a European thing because, you know, I've seen that one example on Emily in Paris. I mean, I've had times before where I say, oh, well, you know, I bought this and it didn't work or whatever. And it was just kind of like, oh, what'd you do to it? Oh, well, we don't, you know, and it's kind of like, it was like this, I swear, you know. There are so many things that I'm really interested to watch more and to learn more about with this show. I've really only seen the first 4 episodes. And I mean, because you don't really know how long she's been there, you don't know how much time has gone by and all this kinds of things. You can't really see maybe the progress that she's making. And I am really just interested to learn more about some of the experiences that she has. I love the fact that she is extremely positive through everything. I know it could also be very different because she's young. I'm probably old enough to be her mother, you know, if I were like a teenage mom maybe, but I'm 42. She's obviously somewhere in her mid-20s. You know, there's a big difference with the responsibilities that she has versus what I have, and all of those sorts of things. But it's really kind of fun to see this. A lot of times you'll see these shows or movies on TV. Hallmark is notorious for stuff like this, where people will go somewhere because they've always inherited some sort of inn, right? Some sort of bed and breakfast. Oh, it's in New Zealand. Oh, it's in Alaska. Oh, it's in all these far off places that people don't really know anything about, right? Americans don't. And then they go to these places and they make the best friends of their entire lives, and they meet the beautiful caretaker with all these muscles, and it's just like, yeah, that's not how it is. Especially, you know, for me living in Denmark, coming to a small town and you're thinking, oh, there's going to be that small town hospitality. No, not to a foreigner, and really not even to people who come from other parts of Denmark, which is so interesting. Because if you are from a different place like my husband is, my husband's not from this part of Denmark, he is almost treated the same way as I am. Obviously, it's a lot easier for him because he understands the culture, he understands the language, and he can communicate. But for me, I don't have that, so there's a larger gap. But there's still a gap between him and the natives of the town. Not just the natives of the country. I mean, he holds a Danish passport. He's a Dane. But I have heard from a lot of Danes who have left the country and come back that they are treated much differently. So it's something very interesting to think about. And I'm almost questioning if that is the same for people who live in other countries. If they leave France and come back, or they leave Spain and come back. How is it for them? I'd be really curious to know. If you want to know about my personal experiences, I have plenty of videos on this channel that tell you about what it's like to live in Denmark and kind of help people transition into a Danish life if they come from another country. But I get a little bit more in depth and a little bit more real on my blog. So check my description for my link to my blog. There is an area that talks about my own personal experiences, and I tell you about some of those not so pretty memories that I've had when I first moved to Denmark, and how culture shock really took a hold of me in that first year especially. So I would really love it if you could check out those posts so you could learn more about my Kelly in Denmark experience. Thanks for coming along on this video. I am hoping to check out more of Emily in Paris. If you have seen it, what do you think about the show? Let me know about it in the comments. And I hope that you come back to check out more videos. As always, take care.